Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble Podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. Now on with the pod. At the end of a week in which Forest lost 4 points to refereeing decisions, and not forgetting the 2 points lost at Leeds earlier this season, that makes a difference between Forest being in the playoff zone and not. We discuss this, transfers, Martin O'Neill's tactics and much more in this, February's Forest Ramble podcast. Hello and welcome to February's Forest Ramble. It's not been that long since we last did one, because obviously we had the podcast extra after Martin O'Neill got the job. But it's been a busy old time in the meantime. I'm here with Maradona Of The Midlands and Stephen Toplis to chew over recent events. Hi to you both.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, well, we're recording this immediately after the Preston match, and it's not been without its controversy, Stephen.
Guess what? We're talking about referees again after a Forest game.
And Maradona Of The Midlands, would you agree with me that we'd much rather not be talking about referees? We managed to go pretty much most of the first half of the season without talking about refs.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a group we don't like to talk about referees because we recognise how difficult a job it is, and when they do make mistakes, they're genuine mistakes. But it's cost us maybe 4 points now in a week.
Okay, so let's break this down. To me, there's a very clear villain of the piece in terms of what happened on Tuesday night, which was, if Dwight Gale didn't dive, the ref wouldn't have been conned. But, on the other hand, as the screen grab that I tweeted earlier this week showed, he was looking right at Joe Lolly when his shirt was being pulled. Now, I guess the argument is that Lolly was also had an arm out on Kieran Gibbs, but surely that's a pen, isn't it? Or if he goes down, it's a pen?
Yes, well, if he throws himself to the ground like Dwight Gale does, then he probably does get a penalty, but he shouldn't have to do that because the game is still ongoing and he's still trying to make something happen in that situation. So he's probably been too honest. And after the game, Lee Mason, according to Martin O'Neill, said that he saw the incident but didn't feel it was a penalty. So why he didn't feel that one was a penalty, we could be all day guessing.
Yeah, and it comes back to that old thing of, well, everyone says diving should be outlawed, but then players who try and stay on their feet don't get the decisions, do they? Maradona Of The Midlands, earlier in this season when Kamar Roof scored that goal in inverted commas for Leeds, you know, the conclusion we came to was there's only so much blame you can attach to the ref for not seeing it and the officials for not seeing it. In real time, it's difficult to do. And the bottom line is Roof cheated. And the bottom line is on Tuesday that Gale cheated, isn't it?
It is. It's one of the most blatant, extraordinary dives I've ever seen. It's literally like he was diving into a pool. I've never seen anything like it. Honestly, it's ridiculous.
And then, I mean, look, there's a whole other debate, and I don't think we're the ones to debate it about, is a 2-game ban the correct punishment? I mean, my gut instinct, and it has been for some time, but obviously it's coming out now, is that when players blatantly cheat, then the only real way to punish isn't to punish the player, it's to punish the club. So, you know, if clubs were threatened with points deductions for, outrageous acts of cheating, then maybe that would have more of an effect. However, in today's match, you can't say that a player cheated. It was just a decision where the ref saw it the other way. So, Stephen, talk us through the incident.
Yes, the shot comes in from the left-hand side and the Preston goalkeeper, spills it. Ryan Yates slides in to try and win the ball. The ball squirms out, it comes out to Joe Lolly, he knocks it into an empty net.
And we should point out that the keeper didn't have hands on the ball at the time. Both the players were kind of sliding towards the ball.
Yeah, that's right. And as far as I see it, Yates was perfectly entitled to make that challenge. He doesn't clatter into the goalkeeper. He doesn't foul the goalkeeper. But for some reason, the referee has disallowed the goal, and that would have been the difference between Forest taking the point which they did, and then
because
taking
it was fairly late on in the match, so we can more or less surmise that it may have had an outcome on the bearing of the match and therefore the points.
Yeah.
So we could say that if it hadn't been for refereeing decisions, that Forest could easily be 4 to 6 points better off, and therefore the teams they were playing would be a point worse off each. In the case of Leeds, West Brom, and of course Preston today, and in a tight division, well, that's the difference between Forest being in the playoff zone at the moment and not, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And if we do end up missing the playoffs at the end of the season by 2 or 3 points, it will be a bitter pill to swallow. I just hope we can turn it around and make it irrelevant by the end of the season.
Okay.
And we're at that time of the season as well where you can't get these points back. If it happens earlier in the campaign, you can say, well, we've got another, 30 games to get points and make things happen. But when you're in the business end of the season, as we more or less are now, and you're not winning, you're not getting the points that you perhaps deserve because of things which are out of your control or things which are simply not fair, then it is going to stick in the throat at that a little bit more, because every point is crucial. And to go back to what we were saying, we don't like to blame referees because they do have a very difficult job, but we're not just talking about an isolated, honest mistake here. We're talking about key decisions and key mistakes which are being made by officials and cheating by players as well, which are having massive effects on games. As you've said there, Forest this week alone could be 4 points better off, and that makes a huge difference to the season and to our position in the league. Add in the Leeds game as well, that's another 2 points. That's 6 points in total, and that could be the difference between having a crack at Premier League football at the end of this season or finishing 10th, 11th, and it just being just another ordinary campaign.
Okay, now I am generally of the opinion that these decisions balance themselves out over the season. So, with that in mind, I haven't added Toby Figueiredo's red card at Aston Villa, which I thought was a fairly dodge. I haven't added that to the list because I was thinking, well, you know what? Jack Robinson got away with one against Leeds at home. He should have been off for that. You could also argue that Lewis Grabban on Tuesday night should have gone for a high foot with his studs up, and he did catch the player. So there's a couple of red cards that we could potentially have had. We probably shouldn't have had a red card against Toby Figueiredo, and that costs you not just for that match, trying to see out ridiculous high-scoring match with 10 men, but also the fact that we lost him for 3 matches afterwards.
You had all the added-on minutes at Norwich, which allowed them to get up ahead of steam and eventually win the game, although that was down as well, to draw the game, sorry. But that was down to poor defending from Forest as well as a combination. Also, Tuesday night, there was a tackle from Gareth Barry on Ryan Yates, which I thought could have been a red. So maybe, yeah, in that regard, sometimes they do balance out in that way. But I think it just shows that there's so many decisions which are not being made or are being made so blatantly wrong in this division that if we can give the referees more help, if that is the form of VAR or more officials at the pitch side, whatever we can do, I think is something that has to be looked at.
Although more officials doesn't seem to necessarily make much difference in the European matches, because that bloke just stands there with a stick and then gives whatever the referee tells them to anyway. And in fairness, linesmen, they don't help. They basically, well, almost half the time, even if they're closest, they wait for the referee to make a decision and then go with him. So there is potentially an issue there. VAR would seem to be the answer. And, of course, VAR would immediately have been brought into play in the West Brom match before the penalty could have been taken. So that would have been an interesting one. But within the rules that we're playing with, VAR isn't there. And it seems as though over the course of the season, we seem to have possibly missed out a little bit with some of those decisions and some of those incidents, shall we say. Do you think it would make a difference to the style and results No, not results. Do you think it'd make a difference in the style and the manner in which Forest are playing if they had those extra points and were therefore in the playoff zone? Ifs and buts.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the positive spin is after this week, we've played well against two good teams, and we're talking about how we should have won the game. So I'm not sure if it would have made too much difference the way the style or anything. It's just I don't know. It's just been we've just been a bit unlucky with it. We just have to say, hold our hands and say, yes, we've been a bit unlucky now. And just take the positives from it. We deserve to win both games, and that's a massive positive, because looking ahead of this week, I was fearful about trips to West Brom and Preston. I could see us easily being outmuscled in both those games, and we haven't been done that, and it's positive.
Okay, let's just have a quick look through the results since the end of January, when we last had a chat. So obviously, since O'Neill came in, how have the results looked, Stephen?
We've had 6 games under O'Neill, and it's been an even split of 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 defeats. The 2 draws being the West Brom and the Preston games, which could have gone a different way, as we've said. And it has been a mixed bag. There's been some good, there's been some bad in there, but I think it's also just been a product of a new manager coming in and beginning to stamp his mark on the team and getting to know the players he's got. But from a perspective of where we were in the table before O'Neill came in, where we are now, we're still in a position to have a go at the playoffs, and when we haven't fallen down the table, we're no worse off as such. So that's a positive, and it seems now that we're beginning to play ourselves into some decent form. If the last 2 games are anything to go by, particularly West Brom, the way we played away to a top team in this league, and the way we pressed them, the way we moved the ball, it was a lot better. And then Preston could have won that game and played okay against a team in good form away from home as well. Then these are positives that going into the next batch of games coming up should give us plenty of encouragement.
Okay. In the first match, O'Neill got some stick because he played 2 up front, and all the people who said, why aren't we playing 2 up front, then said, why is he playing 2 up front? And I think it's fair to say 2 up front didn't work then.
That was Bristol City, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was a very disjointed performance, and it just didn't work having the 2 up there.
Well, however, today it seemed to, because he combined the 2 up front with a midfield diamond, so Joe Lolly was tucking in, playing as a number 10. In the other matches, he has gone for different... We've seen quite a lot of different formations and tactics in each match, and whereas the accusation against Karanka is he was too wedded to 4-2-3-1, and before he even took charge of a match, the accusation against O'Neill was that he's a tactical dinosaur. He'll only want to hoof it. I mean, this goes back to what we were saying about Ireland. Ireland didn't have very good players, so he was quite limited. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that came out when O'Neill was appointed was bordering on offensive, really. It really showed a clear lack of respect for a manager who'd done an amazing job getting Ireland to a major championship with basically English championship players. Darryl Murphy was their main striker. Let's not forget that when he was at Forest in a struggling Forest team. And
of course his other striker being Shane Long, who scored like 1 goal in about 2 years.
This is a manager who got Celtic to a UEFA Cup final, only to lose to Jose Mourinho's Porto, and they were cheated out of it that day as well by Porto. This is a manager who consistently got Villa in top 6 finishes and on a decent UEFA Cup run. They would kill for that now. They'll complain at the time.
And I'd point out as well that Villa were doing that, playing with 2 wingers as well.
Yeah, great players in that team. Some Ashley Young, Milner, Downing, yeah. And they're an entertaining team to watch.
Also, interestingly, if we think about his managerial career at club level, quite often beefy centre halves. So we think about his Leicester team, we think about his Celtic team, we think about his Villa team.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I've really enjoyed watching our 2 beefy centre halves the last couple of games. It's really given me a buzz to see them sort of bullying people like Rodriguez around, and And I thought, if any, they look like typical West Brom centre halves, but they were playing for Forest, and it was amazing because they were just bullying the opposition out of the game. And it's just after the soft touch that Forest have been down the years with people like Mancian playing there, it's just so refreshing to see it now.
Okay, tactically, I think this isn't exactly a controversial statement. I think Marty knows a lot of his outlook on the game. Not necessarily talking about formations, talking about tactics. His tactical outlook on the game very much is a product of him having been a European Cup winner in Brian Clough's team.
Yeah. He's built from the back, and he wants to be solid first of all, and there's nothing wrong with that. Forest, when they've been at their best this season, did exactly that. The time when we were most productive points-wise, when teams couldn't score against us.
And interestingly, I would also say that same tactic is kind of what Karanka was trying to do, but he was doing it in a different way. So he was building it around that defensive midfield screen, whereas Martin wants to have those big, chunky defenders and then, like, really industrious midfielders who... and Karanka's thing was very much about, right, we've got a solid back base, but then it gives the players up front the room to be creative.
I think O'Neill's approach is a bit more aggressive in that they're going after the ball a little bit more. I think Karanka's teams, they will stand off a little bit more and be maybe 10 yards deeper.
He's doing exactly what we've been saying in the podcast, wanting Forest to do all season. We said when they started playing well, it was when they started playing more on the front foot and pressing teams a bit more. And that's when they were at the best this season. It's just started falling off again and just being a bit too respectful of teams, especially at home. Mm-hmm. And so he's doing that now. He's doing what we wanted him to do. He's been playing on the front foot, pressing and being aggressive and not giving other teams time on the ball.
Okay.
The first goal against West Brom was the best example of that, where they were trying to play it out, Forest didn't let them, won it back, and then ball ends up in the back of the net. And it was a great goal to see. It wasn't the prettiest of finishes with the own goal and sort of, he should have put it away. But the build-up to it and the way that Forest won the ball back and then moved it quickly to get into that position.
And the other thing, and
this
is something that Baz reflected on in his match report from the Brentford match, which is that it's about being solid at the back and then getting the ball forward really quickly. And again, you think about the way Martin played as a player under Brian Clough. That's what it was about, wasn't it? It was like the defenders would give it to McGovern would give it to O'Neill, who'd give it to Robbo, put it across, and then Robbo would set up Burkholz or someone like that. So it's a very similar kind of tactical philosophy, even if the formations are different. And I say formation-wise, we've played a 4-4-2, we've played a 4-3-3, we've played a 4-1-4-1, we've played a 4-2-3-1, we've played a diamond, and we've played a 4-4-1-1 today in the second half. So actually, that accusation of being rigid, well, he's a lot less rigid formation-wise than Karanka.
It just didn't make any sense. Are we really saying the Championship has moved so far advanced of where the Premier League was 10 years ago? Are people like Neil Harris, Tony Pulis, are they such tactical geniuses now that
Warnock, who's won a promotion?
Are they so far advanced than Martin O'Neill that he can't cut it in the Championship now? Have they moved ahead of Benitez, where Benitez was, Wenger was, Mourinho was 10 years ago? I don't think so.
I mean, Tony Pulis is obviously a really good example, because I think it's fair to say that fans of clubs who've had Tony Pulis as manager haven't necessarily liked the way that he goes about his job. But, you know, he's one of those, you kind of know what you're getting and you kind of know where to leave you.
Even Pulis in his early days at Stoke, when they got promotion and those first couple of seasons, they were good to watch.
Yeah, they were more expansive, weren't they?
And you knew what was coming, but you just couldn't stop it. You knew the throw-ins were going to come in, you knew the corners were going to come in, and the other team just couldn't stop it. They just did what they did really, really well. And and
as you mentioned, long throws. Funnily enough, Martin's got Jack Robinson and Matty Cash's throw. What was phenomenal! I know there might have been a bit of wind assistance, but it reminded me of Andy Legg back in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it's so refreshing. We scored from a set piece against Brentford, and then again against West Brom, and it's just so refreshing. We've been crying out for that for years.
So two interesting things about that Brentford match. We had 30% possession, so Brentford stroked it around, but they didn't really challenge the goal that much, whereas Forest made the most of the chances that they had. With one exception, Lewis from the penalty spot. Why do you always put it the same way?
Yeah.
And then And you're not going to get another chance, are you? And then the other thing is we scored from a corner. And interestingly, little factoid that came from the Squad Numbers blog tweeted me and included me in a tweet, which was asking, has there ever been a Forest number 13 who scored a league goal before? And we don't think that Danny Fox did it. And then the only other outfield number 13 we've had, I think, is Felix Bastians. So, just
interesting.
Yeah.
Unless it goes back to the days when there were substitutes.
No,
in European games...
They never used to have number 13.
Nah, it was 12, 14, 15.
Yeah.
Or the sub-keeper wore 13 occasionally.
Yeah. I've seen Frank Clark wearing a 13 shirt for Forest.
Have you?
I think it might have been the Cologne semi-final.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, maybe go and check that one out. So, there might have been an instance in the past where the 13 has been used for an outfield player, although I agree it was generally 12, 14, etc., and then maybe 13 was your goalkeeper. But that is a good one to have a look at.
Anyway, I'll let you do that, Steve.
Yeah. Well, while we ponder that one, let's go over to Jeremy Davis with this month's Forest Ramble sketch.
On Saturday, 30th of March, Forest play at home to Swansea City. It's the day after the UK is set to leave the European Union, and Forest's quest to return to the top flight does seem a bit like the Brexit saga. Admittedly, Brexit's only taken 2 years so far, while Forest have been out of the top division for 20, but throw in Black Wednesday in 1992, where Britain crashed out of the exchange rate mechanism in a kind of Brexit rehearsal, and just ask Forest supporting former Tory Chancellor Ken Clarke how well that one turned out. And you can see that the seeds of Brexit were sown around the same time Forest were entering the sad denouement of the Clough years and the malaise set in, notwithstanding the Frank Clarke era, which can be likened to the launch of the euro, in that it promised so much, was highly dependent on strong Northern European imports, but failed to live up to a bright start. So you can see that actually the two timelines fit together quite neatly. In fact, the story of Forest's two-decade push for promotion has a lot in common with Brexit. It never seems to end, no one can agree on the best way to resolve it, and just when you think they might have cracked it, something ridiculously bizarre happens and we all think we're living through Groundhog Day. Whether it's Theresa May's government being defeated by its own rebels, leading Brexiteers like James Dyson moving to Singapore, losing 1-0 at home to Preston the week after scoring 5 in an away match with 10 men, or one of England's all-time great centre-backs scoring the exact same own goal he once scored in the FA Cup final to knock the club out of the promotion playoffs. To add to the strength of the comparison, just like at Forest, the shots at Westminster are ultimately being called by a charismatic leader from Northern Ireland, and we've even got the only Irish thing more controversial than the backstop at Forest in Roy Keane. Actually, comparing Forest the club to the EU itself might be more apt, even down to a recent period of economic turmoil involving Greeks. The latest and perhaps greatest antagonist to confront the EU is Neil Warnock, the former Notts County boss, who may never have wished eternal damnation upon Forest, but he has been a harbinger of gloom for the club down the years. Of course, Man United fans with longer memories may speculate that when he said to hell with the rest of the world, he was simply suggesting that the rest of the world should play a tricky Champions League qualifier away to Galatasaray, or that the rest of the world should visit the small town of Hell in Michigan, USA, which recently froze over. The only major difference is that while Forest keep changing their manager at this first sign of a wobble, the British Prime Minister refuses to leave, no matter what goes wrong or how bad things are going. I suppose it just goes to show that strong and stable leadership doesn't always guarantee that things will turn out right.
Welcome back, and thank you, Jeremy, for the sketch. Now, obviously, Martin came in with the January transfer window underway. Benalouan came in very, very rapidly, and big beefy centre-half, okay, from Leicester, and, it couldn't be a more of an appropriate club for him to come from, given Martin's history and the style of play that he has. But I think, really, one of the real revelations has been Alex Milosevic as a centre-half, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the story is, why he's been out of contract and why he's been playing in Sweden, because a few years ago he was being linked to big clubs around Europe and he was playing at a very decent standard in Turkey, so it's a bit of a coup for us.
And he has that kind of mix of the no-nonsense nature with a bit of skill. I mean, like, when as Big Ron Atkinson used to say, he really sold Rodriguez a lollipop the other night, and that was a lovely moment to watch in terms of making your forward look very, very silly indeed. So actually, I don't know necessarily if it's going to be the makings of a centre-half partnership, but then we've got Wage who's come in. I'd be surprised if he plays that much just because of the other players we've got available, and he's been out for some time, so he's trying to get fitness.
Yeah, I think that's a combination of sort of Forest looking sort of desperate for centre halves, just wanted to get some bodies in at the depth.
But he's on loan, isn't he?
He's on loan, and I mean, it could be another one of those players where Forest have taken him on loan. We seem to have developed some sort of partnership between Forest, Benfica, Olympiacos, Monaco, and the odd Italian club, where the players sort of recycle around. I don't know whether it's some sort of sophisticated mechanism of...
Well, of course, Wage is from Udinese, and I knew him because he played for Watford the season before
Watford
last.
as well, yeah.
So Udinese in Watford, the Pozzo link.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some sort of way of getting around financial fair play by moving players onto each other, or maybe there's a George Mendes connection here. He's sort of doing quid pro quo between all the three.
Easy for you to say. Yeah. And of course, a great example of that is Tassidis had his contract cancelled by Olympiacos, and then he's still under contract to Forest, but he's gone out on loan, so we're not paying his wages anymore. But he'll probably be gone in the summer, and we'll have made a few £100,000 on a player who costs nothing to bring in.
Yeah, so maybe he might be one of those signings. So we don't know. But...
And Capino was another one of those. Yeah. There's every chance that Ansarifard might be one of those.
Yeah, but it's good to have the extra body in the squad at the moment as well, and we needed him in that break.
And of course, Martin did say as well in the post-match interview after Preston that Toby and Dorse still seem to very much remain part of his plans. And why wouldn't they? They're two decent centre-halves. But obviously... Toby, what we thought was a dead leg, apparently there's a blood clot there, so it's going to be some time till he's back. And Dorse, you wouldn't be surprised if his season's over, unfortunately. So that makes sense. In midfield, tell us about the additions we've got there.
Pele, we've got
Yes!
Pele. Not that one.
Oh,
okay.
He's come in from Monaco on loan, and we haven't seen him yet in a Forest shirt, so we're not really sure what he can bring in that sense. But from what we hear, he's a box-to-box midfielder. He's got obviously he's got good height on him and a good physical presence. So he sounds like the kind of O'Neill player that he's looking for in that midfield. Somebody who's got that physicality about them, but also a little bit more of a skillful side as well. Which in the post-match interview, I think it was, after Preston, O'Neill has been saying, like, I want players who have got the physical attributes to deal with the rigours of Championship football and the difficulties of this league, but also who have got those skills and that bit of creativity to win you games. And by the looks of it, Pele might be that type of midfielder.
Mm-hmm. And then in the number 10 position-ish, we've got Leo Bonatini, who's signed on loan till the end of the season from Wolverhampton. What do we know about him?
He had a decent first half of the season last year with Wolves, where he joined them on loan from a club in Saudi Arabia, I think it was.
Yeah.
He tailed away after Christmas, but they still made signing a permanent one. And he's a Brazilian by birth.
And it was several £1 million, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
About 6 million, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, at Christmas time, he looked like a great signing for them. He looked like as good as Jota and the other Portuguese players that were there.
Yeah.
He scored 12 goals in the first half of last season. His last goal was in December, so
yeah. And I wasn't aware that he'd been at some top clubs as well earlier in his career. I think it was AC Milan and one or two others.
Really?
Yeah.
But Wolves fans seem to be a bit down on him because I think after signing his contract he's gone off the boil. But of course you can't be that specific about it when he has also had to move up a level and the Premier League's quite a different kettle of fish.
I don't think he's played that many minutes this season either.
He's not.
So it's not necessarily a fair criticism.
He's still quite young. He's 24, so he can still be learning about his game and certainly adapting to English football.
And of course, in the first half against Brentford, he was one of the better players.
Nearly scored at Birmingham as well when he was on the pitch, and maybe a little bit unlucky to not score there.
He just offers that slightly different options compared to Grabban and Murphy.
And of course, he's actually played in kind of in the place of Carvalho in a couple of matches.
Yeah, but I think he'll offer more of a goal threat, maybe more of an out-and-out striker in that sense. So yeah, it's a good player to have in the squad. If he's on loan, it's not going to cost us a huge amount of money to bring him in. So yeah, why not?
And we've got players who've gone out on loan. So Stephen, who from the current squad is no longer part of the current squad?
Zach Clough has made his regular trip to Rochdale, and he's back there on loan. Doesn't seem like he's got much of a future at Forest. I think it's a case of sending him out on loan, getting him football, and then eventually somebody will come in for him.
And bearing in mind what you just said about Martin's interview, saying he wants players who've got the physical attributes as well as a skill, it does seem unlikely that he would fit into a Martin O'Neill team.
He had all the skill in the world, just too slight for Championship football, I think.
And of course, Martin also gave the example of Benny Osborne, who is also small and slight, but he puts himself about and he really kind of he's got that strength, that core strength.
He's a bit more
solid, so I think that's Clough's downfall. And then, of course, the youngster Virgil Gomez has gone to Notts County, which is significant because it came in the wake of the Alan Hardy issues over the river. So it seems as though, if you'll pardon the rather weak pun, that Alan Hardy has got his tail between his legs. And so little Alan has obviously buried the hatchet. So Virgil Gomez has gone over the river, and George Grant, in what was previously a slap in the face of Alan Hardy, was recalled from Luton so he could go to Mansfield to join Tyler and Jordan Smith. I mean, do we see a future for George Grant at Forest?
It's hard to say with Grant because he obviously performs very well in League Two, and when he was at Luton as well, he certainly did well. It's just he's been at Forest now for a few years, and he's 24. How much longer is he going to remain at Forest until the decision is made that he's not going to have a future here? And he's got to really try and force his way in over the next season, if he's got a chance of a career at Forest. We're seeing now Ryan Yates now in the team, and it's taken him long enough to get there. And had Aitor Karanka still been in charge, it's likely that Yates wouldn't be anywhere near the first team. He might have even gone out on loan to a lower league club. So from George Grant's perspective, I'm not really sure if he has got that future at Forest, and if he has, it's probably going to be very bit part.
I can't see him. I think he's just a bit too old now. And the number of players we've got in the squad and the quality of players, I can't see him breaking his way into it now.
Okay, I mean, with Yates, let's talk about him, because I think everyone was really expecting him to go out on loan again. He did get on the bench for a couple of matches before Karanka left, and he has been in the team for the last 3 matches, and he's been an absolute revelation.
Yeah, came in against Brentford, and to the surprise of many, and including me, when I saw the starting lineup, I really wasn't expecting Ryan Yates to be in there, but he was fantastic on his full debut. He was athletic. He put himself about, put in some good challenges. He was tidy in possession, and he won the Man of the Match award. And then next game away at West Brom, not an easy game for a rookie as such to come into. Certainly a rookie of Championship football. He comes in and he's superb again. He probably should have scored the first goal. Well, he should have really knocked it onto the defender, an own goal. But then
he gets his best to miss.
Then he gets his goal in the second half, brilliantly taken volley into the bottom corner, and he deserved that because his performance at the Hawthorns again was excellent, and he came away once more with the Man of the Match award. So, he seems to fit into this Martin O'Neill mould. He's got the athleticism and the physicality to deal with the Championship, and he seems to have an eye for goal as well. And he gets himself. We've sort of seen today at Preston, he was getting himself in the box to challenge for a ball which was there to be challenged for. So he's making himself a threat in an attacking sense, but also he's doing his defensive work. And yeah, at the moment, you can't see him losing his place.
The other player I do want to mention, because Martin O'Neill seems to be building Forest's play around Joe Lolly being the outlet, and under Karanka it seemed to be that Carvalho was the outlet. Now, João Carvalho isn't getting in the team at the moment. Is the other thing I would add about that is the same fans who moaned about us not playing 4-4-2 and then moaned about us playing 4-4-2 are the same fans who seem to be moaning about Carvalho until he's out of the team and all of a sudden he's the best player and he's the best player in the division or whatever. What do you think about Carvalho's absence from the team?
It's not wholly surprising. I think if he analyses performances during the season, he probably would have seen what we said about him, that he's great, he does that, he's got that moment of magic in him, he can change the match. But he probably also, from what he said in his interviews, he wants more from him, which is what we've been saying all season. He should be on the ball more often, controlling games. And we've said he doesn't control games yet. And given that, he probably only needs one person who he can build a team around. It looks like he's chosen Lolly as a slightly more mature player and somebody who's a bit further progressed in his career. We also should remember that this is the first season Carvalho has played professional football.
And he's 21 years old.
Yeah, and he never played this many games. And just because he's not played the last few games doesn't mean that he's not going to get back in the team at some point in the run-in, where we may be playing weaker teams, where we need somebody to unlock the defence, where they're sitting back, and it's a different type of game. The last few games we've been playing against physical sides in terms of West Brom and Preston, and a team against Brentford where we weren't going to have much of the ball, so we need to be defensively strong and hit teams on the break. Against a weaker team, say, I don't know, a Bolton at home who is just going to sit back and pack the defence, it could be Carvalho comes into his own. So we've got a lot of players, a lot of options, and just because somebody's not in the team right now doesn't mean they're not going to be in a few weeks' time.
And again, Martin has shown that he's willing to pick different teams for different types of matches. So I guess that's the thing. I mean, the fact that Carvalho has come off the bench a couple of times suggests that, Martin isn't writing him off.
What we've got to remember is Martin doesn't want to harm the team or the club. He's not going to necessarily or deliberately drop a player just to cut off his nose to spite his face. If he thinks that player's going to do a job for him, he'll pick him. He's got enough experience and know-how to know which player to use.
Okay, now that leads me into the issue about the manager. So, as we discussed at length previously, Karanka left the club. Now, some people are still saying he was forced out, he resigned, he jumped before he was pushed. And we'll probably never know the exact ins and outs of it. But from all the noises that the journalists have made and from the things that we hear around and about, I still think Karanka probably left of his own accord. There was something that he wasn't quite happy with, and so, being the kind of chap he is, he left. Now, I put a poll on Twitter, and as scientific as this is, with 300 votes, 297 votes to be precise, why on NFFC in the playoff places? And I put the options as being Karanka, O'Neill, the club ownership and referees. Okay, now referees, surprisingly, in the wake of the Dwight Gale thing, came up as 44%. But then it was very close, between 29% reckoning it was Karanka's fault and 25% reckoning it's the club ownership's fault. I would also add in there that we have some other responses. So we had some responses. Batesy said it's the players not performing 100% every week. That's the problem. There will beaters one day and panel beaters the next. Dan was saying it's basically you can't blame the refs. There are times when we haven't scored goals and we have lost games we shouldn't have done. Planty was accusing me of trolling, saying, you've really got people's backs up, and accused me of fishing by choosing refs. I think he had his tongue in his cheek. A very factual answer. We're not in the playoff places because we haven't won enough games, and that comes from James. And then Ross seeming a little bit... saying it is too simplistic to put it into those things, and irresponsible to suggest that O'Neill could be a factor. Now, I did point out to Ross in response to that this is just picking up on the themes that fans have been talking about. When you listen to the phone-ins, when you look at the internet, and I know those are not massively representative, you read the local press, those are the things that people have been saying. Now, what I want to get at as a result of that is this idea about the club ownership. Do we feel that the club are going to back Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane as the management team at the club for the 18 months that they're under contract?
I think as long as they're winning, they will do. I think if they're sort of teetering on the edge of the relegation zone come Christmas next year, they probably won't. They'll probably make the move to change it again.
Okay, Stephen, do you think that they had lost faith in Karanka using that kind of logic?
I'm not sure that they did, because the noises I heard coming out of the club was that they were trying to persuade Karanka to stay. And Karanka, for one reason or another, didn't have any of it and eventually walked. And that suggests to me that they will back a manager, and they won't listen too much to fan opinion or hyperbole in the wake of a defeat or a couple of results that haven't gone our way, a la a previous owner. So I think they're prepared to. I think they will be prepared to back a manager within reason, of course. As long as the club is making progress and there are signs of progression on the pitch, then I think they will back their manager. And they've put themselves in a position now with Karanka going, okay, it's out of their hands to a degree. It's in their interest to back O'Neill and Keane and try and give them that 18 months to bring some stability about, because the club's crying out for it.
They might admit they could have handled some of the things that got Karanka's back up better. They could have maybe involved him more with decisions about sporting directors and things, and maybe better involved.
Still don't know what they do, by the way.
Yeah, we still don't know what they do. So maybe that's where they sort of say, yeah, we've contributed to it slightly. Maybe the worst, maybe the biggest mistake in hindsight they did was once the news came out that he, after the Norwich game, he was going to go, that they didn't actually bite the bullet and do it then. And that's probably just the reaction on Twitter and the Forest fans. They just probably feared that at the time, that would have been a terrible PR own goal. But even then, it was the noises. I remember that after that Norwich game, before the rumours started, just listening to his interview, Karanka unprompted said, "I'm not under pressure. I don't feel pressure." And it was clearly he sounded so under pressure, so stressed. I think it's just the whole situation got too much for him. I don't think he reacts well under pressure. He's shown that at Middlesbrough and at Forest now. And it's just something about his personality. You have to be a really tough nut to be a manager.
But what I would also add in there is that the club were trying to persuade him to stay, which suggests that the club did actually want that stability. So for the 25% people who said, oh, maybe the club ownership is culpable for Forest not being in the playoff places, I don't know. There's a counter argument there. I don't quite know how to articulate this. Stephen, you looking like
maybe that was why there was not a great deal of noise coming from the club, because they were trying to sort out whatever was going on behind the scenes and maybe trying to negotiate or talk with Karanka and persuade him to stay.
Well, Marinakis came over to have those talks with him.
So
and we've got to remember, it just unravelled incredibly quickly. Within 4 weeks, we were sort of on the verge of going into automatic promotion places, thinking, hang on, this is turning into a proper promotion charge. I mean, in 4 weeks, we were talking about losing the manager out of nowhere.
And actually, there's a parallel there with what happened with Karanka at Middlesbrough, wasn't it? When Middlesbrough were going great guns, that Karanka had his little meltdown and took a little leave of absence. Yeah. So maybe it is that thing of getting into a strong position that he suddenly kind of has a bit of a flap. I don't know.
And he walked away from a club going back to his Middlesbrough meltdown. Yeah, for want of a better word. Steve Gibson at Middlesbrough is known for being a very supportive chairman who will give his managers backing, or at least, he throws his weight behind managers. If he hasn't always got the money to give them, he certainly gives them time and support. And even Karanka, fell out with him, or, had a meltdown, walked away, what have you. If you can do that to Steve Gibson, then maybe that doesn't reflect too well on Karanka, and we've seen that happen now at Forest.
Okay, I mean, so the other thing I'd like to say, and this is going on in terms of why aren't Forest in the playoff positions? Well, I mean, the obvious answer is that factual one of we haven't got enough points. One thing that was a problem with Karanka for some fans, and it's always kind of simmered there with me, but I kind of got it, was he didn't give young players much of a chance. And, you only have to look at our stockpile of defensive midfielders. We've got loads of 30-plus players in the squad now. And, of course, O'Neill's come in and straight away has given Ryan Yates a chance. And Yates has proven that if you're good enough, you're old enough, to quote the cliche. Do we see a change in philosophy?
A little bit, but I think it's not just about philosophy. He's picked him because he's seen that he can do a good job in the team. That's the first and foremost the reason he's in the team. He just brought that enthusiasm and ability that he doesn't look like somebody who's only played 2 championship games. It's like in the game against West Brom. He was giving his all to Barry and the lads. You wouldn't know that he'd never played in the championship before. And it's just that enthusiasm, I think, is rubbing off on the other players as well. You look at Lewis Grabban, he was playing with a bit of more feistiness, a bit of a smile on his face, which he doesn't normally do. And I think it's just that he's brought that. I think what we've heard a lot in the last couple of weeks is that they train like they play. Mm-hmm. So that gives you a much greater insight of how a player's going to transition into the team. And if he's been the best player in training apparently in the last few weeks. So it's just when that's happening, that the manager's got no choice. He's got to play them, and it's not necessarily about philosophy. It's just about picking the best players who are in form at the time.
Do we think that there was an issue of trust with Karanka and young players?
Perhaps, and maybe that's just how Karanka operates. He wants to have players of certain experience and maybe of certain ages in his team, and certainly in that midfield for his style of play, for his philosophy. And to a point, it did work at Forest, because when Ben Watson came in initially, he was great, and he was the kind of player that we definitely needed, that experience in there. Colback's not too old, but he's approaching his 30s, and he's in that prime of his career now, I would say. So yeah, maybe Karanka does value more experience over youth. Saying that, he gave Carvalho plenty of game time, and Carvalho's only 21, so maybe it was just in certain areas of the pitch, Karanka is more reliant on that experience, and unfortunately for Ryan Yates, he fell on the wrong side of that.
Yeah, and he was under pressure to deliver this season, so he needed players he could trust and who were proven performers in the Championship. So he wasn't necessarily willing to take a risk and give a player a chance on the off chance.
And we can see that with the fact that Gil Diaz and Diego Gonçalves have barely played. Yeah. Diaz has obviously now left the club, and he's proven that he's got loads of talent, which we knew. I mean, obviously, I think that there's more to it in terms of him moving on. It's because, obviously, he's gone to Olympiacos, which is a coincidence, obviously. But at the same time, is him going out enabled us to bring another lone player in without disrupting the balance of the matchday squad in terms of there's only so many lone players you can pick. Gonçalves, came off the bench and nearly scored last weekend. So, so he's still got something to offer.
Yeah, he looks like he's going to be more involved.
Barely got a look in under Karanka, and maybe again that's down to youth and inexperience. Whereas Carvalho's a slightly different type of signing, because he is a permanent signing, because he did cost that much money. Maybe that's part of the thinking.
Yeah.
Before we come to an end, just off topic slightly, did either of you see any about the Kelvin Wilson interview that was reported in the Post and is available via some YouTube channel or the other? No? Stephen, is that... What was very interesting there is he was reflecting back upon his time at Forest, and apparently the contract offer he got when he was in the team under Billy Davies the first time round was insulting. He admitted that he was put on gardening leave when he signed the pre-contract with Celtic, which obviously at the time was a back injury. But he also admitted that he wasn't putting in that much effort in training because he didn't want to hurt himself before going to Celtic. I think, I'd just like to point out, check it out in the Evening Post. There's a couple of articles in there. Oh yeah, he also thinks that Billy Davies is the best manager ever. Can't possibly imagine why he'd think that. Last thing is, Maradona Of The Midlands. Can Forest still make the playoffs this season?
Yes.
Stephen, can Forest still make the playoffs this season?
Yes.
And there we have it.